Namaste and welcome to Sakshi TV, Mamana Sakshi. Today we are back again with yet another live immigration talk show, which we conduct every Wednesday with Prashanti Reddy from Law Offices of Prashanti Reddy in New York City. She runs a nationwide law firm for over 20 years now, and she has been a counsel for Indian consulates, and she has been voted one of the best lawyers, top 100 lawyers in the country. Today we will take as many calls as we can, and remember, come back every Wednesday. We know there are so many problems. It's not just since the COVID started from Wuhan to Washington D.C. We have so many problems in terms of the immigration and the uncertainty that we're facing today. We are here not just to answer questions, but also discuss with you the problems that Indians are facing, specifically people who are stranded back home and people who are here. Now, one thing before I get there, before we start with the session, I'd like to remind you this session is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as a legal advice. If you need legal advice, you should directly be contacting the attorney, which I'll share the info in a few minutes, directly contacting the attorney if you need any personal legal advice. And based on my WhatsApp research, many people are trying to take the immigration law in their hands without getting professional help. I think we should definitely contact a qualified professional attorney like the one we have today to get legal help. So once again, reminding you again, this is for informational purposes only and not a legal advice. Welcome, Prashanti Garu. How are you?
Thank you, Andy. Thanks for having me on the show. It's nice to see
Okay,
you, Dan.
thank you. Before we get there, we are going to do this session in English, but we can still take questions in Telugu and Hindi. If you మీకు తెలుగులో ప్రశ్న అడగాలంటే అడగండి, but we'll try to keep this to cover maximum audience. We'll try to cover this show in English. Now, the first thing, Prashanti garu, I would like to focus on the possible, the so-called rumors, which is not in the mainstream media, but then the so-called rumors that we have about Trump administration, the presidential proclamation that they're planning to ban entry of H1, J1, and I think H2B, L1 visa holders. I have, for my viewers out there, these are posted by some prominent attorneys. One of them says this is a credible source. I don't know what is a credible source. I haven't seen it on mainstream media, nor the immigration agencies' websites, nor the White House. Now, what is your take on this? How credible are these rumors? When they say credible source, why is this a rumor?
I think it is credible to the extent that something is going to happen, and it will happen soon. We know that much. What is going to happen? What is the content of that executive order? We know there's going to be an executive order soon. Most probably, they're expecting it as soon as the 11th, which is tomorrow. Or it could be around the 14th or the 15th so what I've heard is that they're going to decide by tomorrow what the scope of the executive order is going to be. And by 14th or 15th, or at least by the end of the month, they will publish the executive order. Now, it seems to me that the reason for the urgency is so that it will affect the cap season. And as you know, Dan, you might know, but for those viewers who don't know, the deadline for filing all cap cases is the 30th, the end of this month, June 30th. So they want to bring something out maybe before that time, maybe to scare people, to affect somehow the H-1B cap season. So actually, the breaking news is AILA sent out an email today, pretty much saying that the rumors are credible and that they are expecting, and they have it from the horse's mouth, because there are all these liaison committees that AILA has, and they directly are in touch with USCIS and CBP and many other organizations, Department of Labor. So if they're saying it, I think we should take it seriously. So we don't know exactly what the timeline is. So, but it'll be important that we talk about the scope of what might be in the executive order.
Prashanti garu, before I'll come back. I'll get back to the topic once again. Since we said this is going to be a discussion question answer session. We already have a caller from Texas. Hello? 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 Yes, please. Can you speak your name, please? And ask your question? Hello? Hello? I think we have a technical problem with, I think the call dropped. So, Prashanti garu, now, so you are saying that there is a credible news from American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA, and you have an email, and they're also in a belief agreement that this is true.
That's correct. So, so just to talk a little bit more about the potential executive order and what it might have. I mean, this is a guess, but it's an educated guess. It's not, we're not just, presuming things. So an executive order can only be based on 212F. 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act pretty much talks about the president having the powers to restrict or somehow direct or restrict entry of foreign nationals into the United States. That's what 212 is about. So anything with reference to entry into the United States, he can restrict using 212F via an executive order. So it's important to note that the previous executive order only talked about entry into the US of new permanent residents or people who are filing for permanent resident status. It didn't say anything, or the scope wasn't to include people who are already here. So if he's going to use 212F, and I don't see what else he can do, so one option is to pass an executive order. Another one is to actually publish a regulation. And I think he'll do both. But a regulation takes time. When you actually publish a regulation, it has to go through the Federal Register, and it takes about 12 to 18 months to actually, wait for comments to come, make changes based on what the comments are. So that's a long, drawn-out process.
Okay, I still have to, interrupt you once again.
Sure.
We have Sai from Atlanta. He's on a call. Sai, you're on the air. Sai, can you hear me? Hello? Okay, the call dropped once again. I think we have a little difficulty. I hope our exceptional team at the PCR setup is going to work on this and fix it soon. So let's continue with the topic. But then I personally have a question here. You've been doing this for over 20 years, and I'm sure you've seen the September 11 versus the COVID-19 today. When there was bombing, when there was those flight attacks on World Trade Centers, have you heard anything similar where the U.S. president wants to debar using the presidential powers on the 212F? Have you heard anything about this? Because
so he's done it. He's done that in the past quite a few times. And he's done that recently with reference to banning Iranian people from about 7 or 8 different countries. He's already done that, and it's in place. So right now, people from mostly Muslim majority countries, cannot come into the country. And there's a list of people. So he's used 212F for that as well. And then he's tried to use it again to change the public health, public requirements, public charge requirements. He was not able to do that to the extent that he wanted to, because that was struck down by the court. He also did that with reference to F1s, to change with reference to duration of status. So he has been successful to some extent and not to some extent with using 212F. So it's important to see first, let's talk about what the scope of the new executive order might be. And then we can talk about whether, the legality of it, whether the courts will strike it down. If they strike it down, in what, when will they strike it down? When, okay. Yeah.
Before we jump there, we have a caller,
okay.
Vani from Texas. Hello? Hello? Hello, Vani, can you hear me? Hello? Prashanti ji, I'm so sorry for the mess. I think it looks like we still have a technical glitch out there.
Hello?
So yeah,
Oh, there you go.
yeah. Hello? Did someone say hello?
Yes, I heard someone say hello. I think that might have been Vani.
Vani, are you still there? Can you hear me? Hello? 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 Okay. We'll wait once again. Rani, we're so sorry. Please try to call us back again on those same numbers. I'll try to patch you in. Definitely, we'll take the question. We still have a lot of time. And Prashanti ji is renowned for being very, very patient, and she will definitely answer your question. Okay, so let's get back to the topic now. This is going to be for only for a set of categorized non-immigrant visas, or this is going to be a ban, just like they have done recently. Is it like a countrywide ban? I think there's something happening with China already. I don't want to jump into China and Wuhan at the moment, but then is this something country specific, or this is a generalized ban for all these categories?
So I think what might happen is, from what we're hearing in the general rhetoric that we're hearing from the White House, what they're trying to do is implement an agenda which they already have in place. They already have this agenda, so they're trying to implement it by using COVID, as maybe you can say it's an excuse, or the so-called economic downturn as an excuse. And targeting basically the guest worker program, which is the H1B1, the H1B-Ls, TNs, whichever work visas they are. So I think there is a possibility that it will extend to new arrivals, new Hs, H1Bs, new L1s. It could extend to new OPTs, people who are out of the country, stuck outside the country, and then trying to come back on an OPT, or even maybe people who are stuck outside the country on a H1. So I would urge people who are stuck outside the country, who are already are on a H1, to come back in if you can, but again, no need to panic, because the scope of this, the duration of this executive order, it cannot be forever. It is a temporary measure. An executive order can only be used as a temporary measure. So it's a temporary measure. It could be for the next 90 days to maybe 180 days. Or 60 days even, because the last executive order was 60 days. So they might try to ban H's and L's and O's, OPTs from coming into the country, and maybe even O's and TNs for a short duration of time. Now, will this affect the H1B cap season? That's $1 million question that is in everybody's mind.
We'll get to the H1B cap season. I'd like to share some information here. If you need direct legal advice and you are looking to hire an attorney, Prashanti ji can be reached at Prashanti at Reddy ESQ. That's REDDYESQ, like Esquire. .com, and the phone number is 212-354-1010, 212-354-1010. I see that we have a small problem. There's a glitch with the phone lines. They're trying to fix it now. And in the meantime, if you have to send us a message and you need more updates, follow us at Sakshi TV, the Twitter handle at Sakshi TV USA, Facebook handle as well at Sakshi TV USA. Follow us. And if you have a question, you can also email us. If you want to join us, with the immigration discussions, you can also email us at usa@sakshi.com. That's USA at SAKSHI.com. And Prashanti ji can be reached on the web at Reddy, REDDYESQ.com. And the phone number is 212-354-1010. Okay, now let's jump back into the H1B cap season. I think there was a 90-day notice that was, candidates who were beneficiaries H1Bs that were picked in the lottery. Okay. I think, before I jump there, I think we have a caller. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, hi. What's your name and where you from?
This is Kalaivani from Texas area.
Hi, Kalayawani. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. Please ask your question.
Yeah. So this question is for my husband, so he's asking now.
This is Eka. I just wanted to post this question here. I'm on L1, working for a big employer. Got picked in the lottery this year. My present company has sent the documents to USCIS for the change of status from L1 to H1B. But unfortunately, my project got over and have to look for another one within 2 weeks of time in the same company. So otherwise, if I don't get any other project, then I would have to leave the company. So in this situation, what are the options do I have? So for the worst case scenario, if I don't get a project in 2 weeks, will I be able to switch the employer from one company to other with just the lottery being picked? If so, what is the process?
So that's a good question, but unfortunately, I don't have good news for you. You cannot. But you know what you can do is you can. I don't know what kind of company you're working for, if they're project based, but even if you have filed the LCA, and I know you filed the H1 already for a different client, as long as it's within the same county, you can work for another client. So, for example, if you get an RFE, maybe 2-3 months down the road or 6 months down the road, and they ask you for the client letter and all the usual documents that they ask for, you could always say that the job offer was there when you actually filed, and you can prove that by showing that you were working there, and then you can say that it was the client changed or your contract changed, your project changed, as long as it's within the same MSA, the same metropolitan statistical area, or to just say it in layman terms, if you're within the same county as you were earlier, you could always continue to work on a different project. So, but I'm not sure if your company will support that because they are the employer. You cannot change the employer. You can change the project though.
Okay. I hope you got the answer. In other words, it's a little bad news if it's. He had another question, Prashantiji, wherein his question was, can he change employer while this H1B is pending? I think it's a cap
Yeah,
subject.
unfortunately, he cannot unless he filed. He registered, another company registered for him, and he got picked, and then you can file 2 H1s. But if that didn't happen, he cannot change the employer midstream.
Okay, but his L1 stays intact, irrespective.
L1 stays intact, but I believe that he's losing his job with the L1. Maybe that's why he's filing for a change of status from H to L, from L to H. So he might be out. So he's in trouble because he can't file for a transfer to another L1. And cap season is over. You can't file for a new cap now. So unless he changes his status from L to something else, maybe a H4, if his spouse is on a H1, maybe an F1, student status, so he'll have to find some other status to change to.
Yeah, got it. Okay. And once again, if you would like to connect with the attorney, we are flashing the info or contacts on the screen. So please make a note of it. And we will definitely, if you have missed the numbers, these videos are going to be posted on Sakshi News YouTube channels and Sakshi TV USA Facebook page as well. And you can comment with your questions, and I'll try to get these answers routed directly to the attorney, unless you are seeking a personal advice. We try to, she try to be as courteous as possible to get you those answers. Now, let's jump back into. But one thing, if I just want to go back a little bit about this rumor. So, if the presidential proclamation, whatever they approve, in other words, there is going to be a trouble starting June 15th, in another few days.
Yeah, it could be as soon as June 15th, or it could be definitely before the end of the month, because that's when, the H1B cap cases have to be filed. But the good news is what I was getting to is that
let's hold the good news, Prashant.
Okay.
Let's hold the good news for the end of the show. So
Okay.
let's hold it, because there has been a lot of bad news, uncertainty, and problems with the American dream. People have
Right.
been waiting since 2009 for
Yeah.
their green cards, especially Indian nationals,
Yeah.
people who are born in India, in other words. And it's been like 11 years, and they have grown-up kids, US-born grown-up kids, who have, they're losing jobs. And by the way, I have some information here. On the 14th, there is a charter flight from Newark, New Jersey, EWR Airport into Hyderabad. It's a non-stop flight. I think you should log into usim.org to get more info, or you should also check the Indian Embassy and Indian Consulate websites. They have I think the fare started about $2,250, and you need to get
Yeah.
approved by the
Right.
Indian Vision. I'm sure you heard about this, Prashanti.
Right, Dan. So the other update to that, to add to what you said, is also that actually Air India has started bookings online. So you can
Yeah.
actually go directly to Air India and book.
Okay. We have a caller. Hello. Let's take the call.
Hello.
Yes. Hi. What's your name, please?
Hello.
Hi. What's your name?
Yeah, hi. My name is Chandra.
Hi, Chandra.
I'm calling from Connecticut.
Connecticut. Okay. I'm in Jersey, so
Yeah.
not too far.
We're all neighbors.
We're all neighbors.
Oh, that's good.
Yes. Yes.
So
Please go ahead with
can
your
I ask
question.
my question here? Yeah, sure. Thank
Yes,
you.
please.
So actually my question is quite different. So I was laid off due to this pandemic with my previous employer. I was working for some consultancy, and the client got suspended the project, and I was laid off from the client. So at the same time, during my 60 days grace period, I got another project, and they filed my H-1B petition. And before I received the petition, received notice, my previous employer called me back, and they offered me again. So I again started working for my back project. So meantime, I received the new receipt for the new employer. In this case, can I work for both the employers for until I get full approval of the new petition?
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
that's
a
a
good
good
question.
question, actually. So generally, as per AC-21 regulations, if you file a transfer, you can start working for the company B the moment that they receive that petition with USCIS. But in this case, if you've decided not to go ahead with the transfer and you go back to your old employer, and you can because you have the 60 days grace period. I think number one,
Yeah.
to go back to your new employer, if you want to be completely safe, and again, maybe other people will differ with what I'm saying, but if you want to be completely safe, you should again file for some kind of an amendment or something with your own employer. You can't just be out of status, be in the 60 days grace, and then join back as if nothing has happened. So that's something to think about. Nothing has come up as yet that gives us information on that topic, but it's a gray area, but something to think about for sure. So anyway, if you went back and joined your employer, and you're also working for this other employer, remember you did not file a concurrent H1, you filed a transfer. If you had filed a concurrent H1, yes, it would have been possible for you to work with two employers at the same time. But since you filed a transfer, I think you should decide which boat you want to be in. And then, withdraw the other petition. You can't, put one leg in each boat. So I think you need to
Oh,
decide at this
okay.
point.
All right. Thank you,
Okay. Yes.
Chandra.
Thank you.
Now, on those lines, Prashanti ji, I have a question. How many concurrent H1s? How many jobs, in other words? There are 40 hours, people work 60, 70 hours a week. If somebody's
Right.
working 16 hours a day and, they work 80 hours a week, now how many concurrent H1Bs one can have?
So it really depends on how many hours in a week you can work. You obviously can't, I mean, 40 hours is the usual time. I would say 80 hours is stretching it, but people do work 80 hours a week. So it depends on how believable it is, because you have to sleep at some point. You can't work 24 hours. So as long as it's believable, there is no limit as such in the regulation to how many hours you can work. But if you're working 24 hours a day, then obviously there's going to be, USCIS is going to think that there's something fishy there. So as long as it's believable and it's logical, you can, have whatever number of H-1Bs at the same time.
Okay. Well, we have another caller, Pratyusha. Hello.
Hi,
Pratyusha,
my
on
name
the
is
air.
Pratisha. I'm calling from New Jersey. The show is really
You're calling from
informative.
where?
Thank you. I'm calling from New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay. I'm here in New Jersey, right here in East Brunswick. So you're probably enjoying the hot weather, right? During the COVID. Yeah.
Yes.
Please ask your question.
Mm. Yeah. Actually, recently we heard that Trump is going to ban H-1B visas. So right now, me and my husband, we are on H-1 visa. So I want to know, is it a rumor or is it a fact? Suppose if it is a fact, what would be the after effects because of this ban?
So, Pratyusha, Trump or nobody can ban H-1B visas. Please get that out of your mind. Don't worry about that. Don't have sleepless nights because of
Okay.
that.
An entry
No one
ban.
can actually, no one can actually ban the H-1B visas because it is a law. And the president, whoever it might be, no one can change the law. The only people who can change the law is the legislature. So it has to be the House and the Senate that votes to change the law. So the only thing they can do is they can amend it. And even that, the amending it, they have to do it through, as I was saying before, a regulation. And if they have to do a regulation, that usually takes 12 months to 18 months to get a regulation in place. Now, it's possible that he might do an interim, something that's called an interim regulation, or it's also called, there are two ways of doing it. Either he can pass an interim final rule or a temporary final rule. So these are regulations. And to put it shortly, you don't need that much time to pass these temporary regulations. So there is no comment period and there's no notice period. It doesn't have to be published. But even with these interim final rule or the temporary final rule, it is temporary, it is interim, which means that if he says it's forever, then the courts will strike it down immediately. So even that, he's very limited in what he can do. So what I think is at this point, what he'll try to do is, as we were discussing on the show, use 212F, which is another regulation in the Immigration and Nationality Act, which will only allow him to restrict the entry of people coming into the country. So people who are already here need not worry. It's people who are entering freshly into the United States. Maybe their H's, people who are on H or L or some other status, they might get affected. And even that is for a temporary period of time.
Okay.
Okay. I
Prashant,
have one more question. Yes?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I have one more question. This temporary effect, is it going to have any effect on the renewal, like H4EAD, all those things for the renewal?
See, first of all, it's very unlikely that he will completely ban H1s even for a temporary period of time, because if he tries to do that, he has to have a justification for doing that. So there'll be thousands of people affected in the US. They have to leave the country. And thousands of jobs will be affected. So it's almost an impossible scenario. I'm saying this and I hope it doesn't happen, but it's an impossible scenario for it to happen because there's no justification for it. And the courts will, first thing they'll do is they'll go to court. People will go to court. Companies will go to court. They're not going to keep quiet. And the judge will strike it down immediately, because you can't have an all-out ban on all H1s. That's not possible. You can restrict it in some way through regulation. And when I say restricted, maybe what he'll do is, maybe he'll decide to increase the prevailing wage, from level right now to level 4. Maybe he'll say everybody should be paid level 4. Maybe he'll say, there are many things he can do. Maybe he'll increase the fee to $20,000 or something like that for new H1s. So these are the things that he can do, but he cannot completely ban H1s. So, I don't think you need to worry about that.
Right. Wonderful. Before we get into the Pratisha, by the way, thanks for those kind words when you called in. I think we jumped straight into the question, but thank you. And please let your friends know we will be streaming live every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and follow us at Facebook or Twitter at Sakshi TV USA. We are also on Instagram and Pinterest. We keep posting these updates. So 5:30, and this is going to be my show, purely immigration. But if then, if you wanted to check your luck, this is not the show. We have a show every Friday at 4:30, astrology and palmistry with, not palmistry, I think Vastu, with Dr. Deepika Sanghi Gupta, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. Now, before we jump into the H-1B cap season, I still, why these, why they're spreading these rumors. If I, just like I said before, in 2007, the duplication, someone wrote an article that there might be a lot of H-1Bs this year. Then people started filing multiple applications, 5, 10 from one employer. Then the CIS tried to stop that. Now, I'm sure, this is not an immigration question, but then every time we see something, either I see something coming up in the Indian media, and now we have another problem. I wanted to discuss about the layoffs or furloughs of the USCIS employees. I think you were in the media today, a bunch of online media, Indian newspapers. Now, can you give us a little info on what is this 10 to 11,000 furloughs of the USCIS employees? And it's like, when police are furloughed, what is going to happen to the country? Or police go on strike, right? So
yes, basically what's happening is USCIS is self-funded. So self-funded means that they don't get a budget from the government. They don't get money from the government. They get money through USCIS fees. And because
we pay and we get in trouble.
We pay and get the service, and they don't give us a great service.
Service or trouble.
It's a service oriented, benefits
before
organization, but they've forgotten that.
Okay, but before we continue with that, Prashanti ji, I have a caller, Rakesh. Rakesh, you're on the line. You're on the air, Rakesh. Rakesh, can you hear me? Hello, sir. All right, I think the call got dropped. So now what happens if, but they're making tons of money in fees, right?
Yeah. So what happened is that the caseload has gone down by 60% as per their own statistics that they're showing. 60% less cases have been filed. And we're not just talking about H's, which are decreased because of COVID, but we're also talking about family-based petitions. We're talking about this executive order that because of which petitions have been decreased also. So we're talking about application support centers being closed, so anything you file, whether it be a H4 EAD, you file a H4, you file a B2 extension or a B2, which is a visitor's visa, or you file a green card, you need to go for biometrics, you need fingerprints taken. So if those offices are closed and the case cannot be processed, then people are going to wait until the offices open in order to file their case, if they can. So that's something that has happened. People are not filing their cases right now. They're just waiting. And the other reason they're waiting is because of the anxiety. We've already had one executive order. They don't know what to expect in the future. So they don't want to file anything unless they know for sure. And also the elections. They're hoping that things will get more clear once, the elections are over. So, they'll know where they stand. And again, the economic downturn because of COVID-19. Not that many H1s are being filed. So because of all these reasons, their fees their income, their revenue has really gone down. So usually they're about 3 billion, I think, in revenue that they get every year through filing fees. And now they're asking for, I think, 2 point something billion bailout. And they're saying that by the 28th, if they don't get it, then they will lay off 11,000 employees. So if that happens, to answer your question, processing times are already horrible. You file a H1, and if you don't file premium processing because it's usually not available, last year it wasn't. It takes. I've seen H1B cap cases take from 12 months, a year, until the next cap. That's when the decision comes.
Yes, Prashanti, I'm so sorry to interrupt once again. We'll come back. I do have a caller, Swapna. Swapna. Hello, you're on the air.
I'm Swapna.
I am from North Dakota. Can
North Dakota.
the wife and husband, one will be in H1 visa, H1B visa, and one will be in TN visa? We are Canadian citizens.
Okay, no, I think we didn't get the question right. So the husband, one of the spouses is in H1 and the other spouse in TN, like the Canadian TN.
Yes.
Okay.
Can we work like that? Like one is in the H1B visa and one in the TN visa?
Yes, absolutely. There's no reason you can decide what status you can be on. It's not necessary that if your spouse is on H1, you have to be a dependent. You can have your own independent status, or vice versa. Your husband can have his own independent status. So absolutely, you can be on TN, and one of you can be on TN and the other one can be on a H1.
Yes, Swapna.
Okay,
That
thank
answers your
you.
question. All right, thank you. All right, so I think I think we have a 500,000 H1Bs out there. So USAS needs probably funding. I think one should go on GoFundMe and put in like $10,000 and get the USAS employees back up and
I
running.
think we're already doing that.
Oh, really?
The enormous amount of filing fee that we pay, and the premium processing fee that we pay. I mean, the only thing we can expect, what we want is, just to advocate on behalf of my clients, is that give us the service that we're paying for. It's not the question of charge whatever fee that you need to, but give us the service, that we're paying for, and be reasonable when you adjudicate cases. That's all, we're asking for, which is not the case. So that's where the change needs to happen.
All right, you said you have some good news, but we'll talk about it after 15 minutes. It's 6:05. Now, before I jump into the H1B cap, what happens with these rumors and bans? I do have another caller, Venu. Venu, you're on the air. What's your location?
Yeah,
Venu,
hi.
can you hear me?
I'm calling from Detroit.
Detroit. Okay.
Yeah,
Please ask
I heard that I hear there is a travel ban coming. So, what is the consequences and what is the status would be?
I think we just we've been speaking about it, but do you have a specific? You have someone stuck in India who's like an H4 who's planning to travel back, or it's a general question you want to know based on these credible rumors?
Yeah, actually, I had a plan regarding to travel in March, but I postponed to June. So it's still can I go ahead and plan, or do I still need to wait until
Yes,
2 months?
that's a good thing that you asked a specific question, and Dan got that question out of you.
That's a missile, right? Take it up. That's a good question. Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, I think you shouldn't travel now, really, because there's so much uncertainty, and there are no flights. So I don't know how you expect to travel in June, because now the emergency flights are only for students and older people. There's a criteria there, so all the flights for June have been booked, by the way. And because I'm working closely with the Indian consulate, so I know I've been helping a few people get on these emergency flights. So there's no way you can travel in June even if you want to. Maybe later in the year, but I suggest that until the executive order comes out, you stay put and don't travel. Just stay where you are.
All right, you got the answer. Yeah, it's so pathetic. People they have deaths in the family, and then they have, marriages fixed. They can't travel. I don't know if people are going to sooner do an online marriage, like an online meeting.
A Zoom wedding.
A Zoom wedding, right? So, and they just stay apart forever, and there is no. It's a lot of uncertainty if they travel. Are they going to come back? The question. Now there are, you shouldn't plan traveling, as she rightly said. This is a moment of uncertainty. If you don't have an emergency, not just for the sake of it, for fun or a pleasure, you probably get quarantined in India for 14 days, and then you might get into some other trouble. So you are going to open up a can of worms. So
Right.
no
So-
traveling unless it's an emergency.
So the only
Okay.
exception would be if you're on a visitor's visa, and then obviously you have to go back home. So because it depends on where
Right.
your home is, or you're a student and you know stopping for the summer and all classes are online, then it's fine to travel because you're because that's a long-term thing. You're going back home. But otherwise, if you're on a work visa and you're going for 2 weeks, I would caution you to weigh your the advantages and disadvantages, depending, of course, on what your circumstances are. You need to make that decision.
You just quoted visit visa. They have to go back home. I'm looking at these. Especially the senior citizens from India who are stuck here who filed their extensions. Have you seen any extension approvals on these B2 visas?
So we don't expect to even see approvals simply because the processing time is so long. And biometrics, remember, biometrics need to be done for all these cases, and biometric offices are closed. They're slowly opening them in some states, but they're still predominantly closed. So the only, what I've been telling my clients is just file it, because that's what you need to do. You don't need to get an approval. And more, even during non-COVID times, when you file for a B2 extension for 6 months, we usually get the approval after the extension period is over. So what it is you just need to file so that you can remain in status. You'll be in pending status for that period of time. And then just remember until when you asked for it. If you asked until January, make sure you leave before January. Just keep that date in mind. And as long as you leave before the time that you've asked for, you should be fine. And then you'll have the receipt. Make sure you show the receipt if there's any questions next time when you're coming back in.
Okay. We have another caller, Satyapal from Texas. I think there are a lot of Texans here on the call today, on the show today. Satyapal, you're on the air. Hello.
Thank you, Prashanti Garu and Sakshi, for a very informative program. My question is regarding future travel. Like I said, if I plan my travel in July or August, does this order is going to impact while coming back? And I'm on a green card, permanent resident status.
Oh, okay. So I doubt it. I wouldn't worry if I was in a permanent resident status. The executive order right now applies only to people who have not yet received permanent resident status, who are most probably who have applied for a green card but have not received it. And there is an exception for people who have already received the visa. So, I wouldn't worry about that, about traveling if you're already a permanent resident.
Okay, so you heard that. So if you are a permanent resident and up, which is US citizen, you don't foresee any problems if the flights run. And again, if you are from X country, you have to go by the regulations of that country as well. In this case, we are referring to India. So you need to understand do proper vetting on the process before you even attempt to travel. We all have the same problem. I have family back home. I have my parents.
Right.
Everybody's got the same problem. We are in the same boat. So there should be a light at the end of the tunnel. So at least for the H-1B workers, I think the IT market has not been really greatly affected. So stay put and keep watching every week. We still have 15 more minutes. I'm not signing off right now. So let's jump into Prashanti ji. When we started off, we were talking about the H-1B cap filings. I know people have been getting approvals. That's what I hear on the news, on the internet groups. The 90-day June 30th deadline that you were talking about, and you had something to share. Can we get some light on the?
So basically what I was trying to say is, even if there is an executive order passed which affects new H1s from coming into the country, I don't think people should stop filing cap cases. And the reason is that we have to remember that the cap cases, the start date is October 1st. So it's anyway future employment. It's not something that's happening now. So as of October 1st is when that person will be actually be able to come in. And knowing the processing times and, and the time taking that it takes to get a H1, most probably it'll be beyond October 1st. And, then getting the visa and the preparations, usually I see that people don't come in before January if for the new H1s. So the cap cases for the new H1s for people who are outside the country, they should still continue to file. The good news is it will not affect them because the executive order can only be temporary. Remember, that's the key word. It cannot be a permanent executive order, or permanently they cannot change the law banning all new H1s. So as long as the situation exists, they can ban. But another thing to remember is just because Trump passes an executive order doesn't mean that the courts will uphold it. That's a completely different ballgame. They might just strike it down completely. So let's see, if suppose they do pass a ban on new H1s, what's going to happen? Somebody is immediately going to file a lawsuit, that's for sure, 100%. Then the judge has to see whether it's justified or not. What is the reasoning behind filing such an executive order? It cannot be based on the whim of a president, right? There has to be a necessity to do this. So if the government says that it's because of the economic downturn, then immediately you will see who are affected by this order. 80% of the people affected by the order are the IT sector. And as per latest reports, and I think Forbes reported it as well, that the unemployment was 3% before COVID. That is in March, early March, it was 3%. And in April, unemployment in the IT sector was actually 2%. Wow. So unemployment actually went down in the IT sector. And this is based on the government statistics that they have on unemployment. So there is absolutely no reason for banning new H1s from coming into the country, especially if they're coming in the IT sector. And they will definitely, because there are other, so if there is an executive order, they will definitely make exceptions for different industries. They will make exceptions for sure for doctors, for healthcare, for researchers. They will have to carve out those exceptions because again, it'll be too broad and no judge will pass it. Will let it stand. So when they're doing that and then they see that the only people affected are actually IT people, then there's going to be a question as to what the market scenario is and why this was done. So it has to be justifiable.
I do have a question from one of our Sakshi TV's Facebook friends. Now, what happens if the H-1B is approved? I'm talking about the cap subject petitions, assuming it's valid for a year, and nothing happens for the next 1 year, and the beneficiary cannot come into the country. Do they have to go back through the lottery, the random selection process once again, or they can use the same H1 to come back?
So that's a good question because I can further talk about what happens then. So to further expand on what I was saying, it doesn't affect the H1B cap season because again, the new H1s will come in most probably next year. And as long as you have an approval, you can use it at any time before that approval expires. So if it's for 3 years, you can use it any time before the 3 years, as long as you show.
What happens if it's expired?
So after 3 years, you cannot use that H1, and then you have to go through the cap again because they never worked on the H1. You have to actually work on the H1 for at least a day because they're using the strictest possible interpretation for cap exempt now. Strictest possible for everything, but cap exempt also. So they're saying that you have to work on the H1 in order to be cap exempt within the last 6 years, anytime within the last 6 years.
Recycle it or reuse it, right?
To not be subject to the cap. So 3 years is a long time or even 1 year is a long time, or 2 years, or whatever the H1B period is. You can come anytime. You can go to the only requirement is if, for example, you're going a year later to the consulate for a visa, the only thing they'll ask you is, do you still have that job? So they'll want to make sure that you have updated documentation and an updated employment letter and offer letter from your employer. So as long as that is there, you can come in anytime. Really, you can pick and choose when you want to come in. And it doesn't affect the cap season in as much it doesn't affect change of status applications. As we said, executive order, they can only use 212F, which talks about new entries into the US. And regulation, as we talked about, takes time. So then this season, it will not affect the change of status, F1 to H1, H4 to H1, the change of status application. So I don't see it really affecting this H1 season. It's only for those people who have to come in on October 1st or who have to come in this year for some reason. Maybe it'll affect them. So I think the effect will be diluted as it is, even if they say what we think they'll say. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, there has been a lot of bad news, and every other day, people wake up with some kind of bad news. The biggest bad news, at least, a few of us who are watching us today, we are still alive. There have been like 200,000 deaths in the country. Most likely this will get settled down pretty soon. New Jersey is getting opened up. That's some good news here. And before we get into the next informational session, you have been doing this for over 20 years. I see you graduated from law school in 1996, 24 years ago. Now, what type of practice areas, what are your practice areas? Is this specific for employers, or are you like a kaleidoscope of petitions that you work with? So can you give us more information about your law firm before we jump into the next interesting session?
Yeah, so basically, I do specialize in business immigration. So I do a lot of H's and green cards just because that's my clientele. Mostly tech companies and actually a varied healthcare, tech, education, and filing H1s and green cards. But not to say that I don't do family immigration. I do a lot of family-based immigration as well. I also do asylum because I've just been doing a lot of asylum pro bono. I work for a lot of some nonprofit organizations, so I do some pro bono work as well. And I've done asylum in the past, so I'm comfortable with asylum as well.
So next week, Prashanti ji, we'll just focus on firms and green cards, asylum cases as well, employment-based green cards. People sitting in the backlog since 2009. I'd like to, if you guys can come back next Wednesday at 5:30 Eastern time, we'll try to do some comparisons from what happened when the firm came in 2005, and then people were lucky in 2007 and 8. They were able to get their green cards. But before we get there, I have a caller, Harinath from Texas. Once again, Prashanti ji, we have a lot of Texans here. So I think the Texas woke up. They're active. Harinath, you're on the air. Please ask your question. Hello? Are you still
I'm
there?
just listening in. No questions. I apologize. No questions.
No, the questions are answered. Thank you. So I think we've been doing pretty well. Even the last caller, once again, I'd like to thank you for the kind words. We'll try to be as informative as possible, get you the latest and hot updates. Don't forget to follow us at Sakshi TV USA on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. That's our handle. And Prashanti ji can be reached at, it's a simple website, REDDY, Reddy, ESQ, like Esquire, Edward Sam Queen, ReadyESQ.com to seek a private, personal, confidential consultation. So we have, we're getting a little down on the time, but then next session, next week, next Wednesday, we will definitely focus on, please send us those questions. You can email us usa@sakshi.com. And I promise I will forward those questions into Prashanti ji and try to get answers as quickly as possible. Once again, I urge you not to discuss on WhatsApp groups and get the negative information and get messed up with. I was talking to Prashanti ji on the call the other day. She was trying to explain what happens if there's you put a no and a yes on a form, how seriously you can get into trouble. So you should definitely seek professional advice. She's here with over 20 years of experience. They serve nationwide. I think, everything is, right now working from home. I'm sure Prashantiji's kitchen is filled up with paperwork. I really want to come and check your kitchen and see how many tons of papers you have sitting there, those copies.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
So,
amazing how we've learned to work remotely, especially a law firm.
okay, we have another caller, Prashantiji, Peter
Yes.
from India. Peter, you're on the call. You're on the show. Sorry, you're on the air. Please ask your question.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dan, for this opportunity, and
Thank
Prashanti
you.
ji, your time. It's a great show, innovative show. So my question here is, my H1 is picked in lottery and it's been approved, and I'm stuck here in India. So what if my employer withdraws my H1? So what would be the circumstances? I mean, how would be my thing?
Wow, that's an awkward question.
Yeah. I mean, if your H1 is already approved, but you obviously have not started working on the H1 because you're still outside the country, and I don't know if you've gone for a visa or not. So unfortunately, if your employer doesn't want you now, then you'd have to try in the next cap. Unfortunately, that's the only way around this, because you will again be cap subject, as we discussed earlier. Me and Dan were discussing that unless you actually start working on your H1, even if it's one day, you were on the payroll for at least one day on your H1, then it is cap exempt. Otherwise, it is cap subject. So if you have to file a H1 again, even though you were picked the last time, since you haven't started working, you have to unfortunately wait for next year again.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for that call. I'm sure it's pretty early in India. And before we have 2 more minutes. Before I forget, it's pretty early in the morning, and I'd like to thank Sakshi TV's our internal team, the PCR team, who's working hard in the night. And then I have, I'm sitting in the studio. I came with a mask, so we're doing the social distancing, and I'd like to thank these people, and also the staff at Hierarchy people who helped me promote this show today. So you had probably a little good news. We have exactly 1 more minute before we end the session. Once again, uh, try to send us a message at Sakshi TV USA on your favorite social platforms. We will try to be as responsive as possible. But stay tuned in next week, next Wednesday at 5:30 Eastern Time. This is going to be a repetitive show every week. We are going to be here. If there are no hot topics, we'll simply ask. We'll discuss options with the attorney. So I heard you had some good news, or we already shared the good news during our discussion, Prashanti ji.
I think we already shared it a little early, but I think on time, because it was a long topic. So the good news that I wanted to share was the fact that whatever executive order comes in, it should not deter the H1B cap season. It should not affect the H1B cap season. I think, and I explained why. Even though the idea is, I think that's what the government wants to do. That's what Washington wants to do, but they may not be successful in doing it simply because of the logistics of everything. They forget that H1B cap is for future employment because you're filing 6 months in advance, and that just the processing time takes so long that the executive order might just be nullified by the processing time.
I'm so sorry, we're running against the time. And thank you for watching Sakshi. Please stay tuned in next week, Wednesday. Namaste. Signing
Thank
off,
you.
this is Dan with Prashanti ji.
Thank you, Dan.